Today we are going back to budget-oriented cases, and with budget I mean really budget. Do not expect USB Type-C, extensive cable management or any sort of quality of life improvements. However, being budget does not always mean that you are leaving performance on the table, even if the case costs barely 60 euros. Like for example Montag, their X3 mesh case, which was really budget as hell, but it was an all-rounder solution for the budget-bound people that just wanted to get going. And this is exactly that. This is the FSP CMT212A. There are three versions of this case: a regular empty CMT212, a CMT212 with three 120s and one 120mm fan in the back pre-installed, and then there is another choker edition. The one where somebody thought it would be a great idea to replace the mesh on the front with straight up glass, almost completely suffocating the front intake. But as I have found my substitute for my choking fetish years ago, we are going with the A version, the one with the mesh in the front. Though you can still expect that each of the cases is exactly one-to-one the same, except that the G version will add probably like 2, 3, 4 degrees C to everything. On that note, do you remember the Acer Celesta 340? It's been a very long time, but that thing came with the same ARGB effect that today's topic has. Behind the front panel, which for some reason still has the cables going from the interior into the rest of the case, which is just annoying, but anyway, behind it there is a white mesh type of film, and that thing is supposed to reflect the light that is shining onto it from within the front panel using a couple of LED strips. And I guess you can really show off the result of this. Now this effect does look kinda cool, and so did it do on the Celesta back then. However, if you look closely, you'll notice that the Celesta had a very limited amount of holes going all across the front panel, basically limiting whatever air can go in. For the FSP version, however, we have a full-on mesh front panel allowing for maximum airflow with minimal impact, which will then become quite a big amount of impact because of the RGB like reflector thing, but it looks a bit restrictive, but yeah, that's for later. But before we get there, let's take an overall look at the case's specs. Once unboxed out of the obviously budget but still sufficient brown carton box, we will find that the case is about 440mm high to 10mm wide and 410mm long. It is standing on four relatively small but still sufficient stamps, which give the PSU about 1.8 to 1.9 of breathing space, though considering that there will not be going any air in except for the PSU itself, it is still kinda alright. The tempered glass side panel is mounted down using the older and not so good feeling screw through the glass mat, the first of many occurrences of this feeling a bit budgy. Inside we'll get slightly delighted. There are cable management holes. All around the motherboard and on top of the PSU tunnel there is a surprising amount of holes for cables, and they are actually big enough to get some of the cables through. Sure, they could have been rubberized, that's for sure, but given the price point, it would be a miracle. As for motherboard support, we can fit the usual suspects in here: ATX, micro ATX and mini ATX. For the CPU cooler, we can go with things that are up to 160mm high, so Nokia NHU12Ss and Be Quiet Darkrock Pro 4s, all those sorts of CPU coolers will fit into this. For the GPU, we are unfortunately a little bit restricted. FSP states up to 320mm long cards, which I can agree, so my 4080 Phantom won't fit in here, but my 318mm long Zotac 3080 Ti fits just so in. The power supply has its own compartment in the bottom of the case, including a little glory hole, which, can we please stop doing that? Due to the case's quite small form factor, we can only fit up to 150mm long PSUs in here, but don't be afraid if you're willing to get rid of the drive cage in the front by unscrewing it in the bottom and then just simply putting it out, we can expand that to the full case length. Speaking of which, the CMT212 supports up to 2 SSDs or 2 3.5-inch drives, though one spot is shared by either of them. The drive cage has a regular spot inside of it and another one for either a 2.5 or 3.5-inch on the top side. The other raw 2.5-inch spot is actually below the PSU shroud by screwing the SSD in from the top. It will look really weird, and I guess in theory you could also do it the other way around, having the SSD on top, but you will never get the screws in. But on that note, you can also just hot glue it. Nothing is stopping you from just, stacking SSDs down here. You can do whatever you want. The I/O located at the top front of the case is best possible for the budget. One USB 3.0 Type A, two USB 2.0 Type A's, and a separate audio in and out, accompanied by a surprisingly clicky start button, and for once, a clickable RGB button. Yay, my fat sausage fingers can fit in. Of course, the I/O is nothing special. There is no USB Type-C. There is no Gen 1, no 3.1. It's really old, but considering the price point, I mean, what can you do? Now let's get to the whole fan situation. The CMT212A case is clearly a out-of-the-box thing. It comes with 3 unnamed in-house 120mm intake fans in the front and another one in the back as exhaust. All of them are wired together using a bunch of 3-pin voltage-controlled splitters. So in the end you can connect all of them using a single header and you are essentially ready to go. And on that note, FSP also includes an additional 3-pin ARGB header in case you want to expand the existing ARGB circuit, and a 3-pin ARGB female in case you want to go with motherboard control. On the fans, they are not particularly good, nor are they particularly quiet. They are somewhat like the ones used in the Montec X3, nothing special about them, but they do the job. The case is really affordable and therefore it's okay. Plus, compared to Montec's approach, those are at least controllable and not like spinning at full speed thanks to the Molex Centipede, which is already something. The one thing I would have wished for though is that whoever does the cable management on those didn't have a stroke before putting our unit together. Like he routed, or he, she, I have no clue, but the person routed all of the fan cables, the front fan cables, through the big 24 pinhole instead of the smaller one next to it. Meant for it. And then he bumped the PSU shroud, resulting in some paint damage. But hey, at least the FSP logo looks nice. So although it is not good by any means, it is more than enough for the price you would pay for it. And you got a good start. You are always free to upgrade down the line, which is still fine, and upgrades will make sense. Better fans will make sense in here. Especially adding another one on the top and then slowly replacing the existing ones. As far as water cooling support is concerned, there is not so much we can do up here. We have 240 support in the front due to the front I/O cables being squished against them, so no way of putting a 360 right in here, but 240 will work. Maybe in the top? No, not even. And the top is so low essentially that if you would put a radiator in here, yeah, good luck with your VRM heatsink. I don't see a way in which even 240. No. Speaking of the top, the one thing I do not understand is that the top is covered using a magnetic dust filter, which is fine. And it hides an enormous outlet, very spacey, very big, which is also perfect. But why are there no 140mm fan spot? Like, no, not at all. There would have been at least space for one 140 fan, maybe even 2, but at least one. I just don't get why they made it so huge to then not really use it. So the CMT212 is budgety as hell, that's for sure. All except the first PCIe slots are breakout. There is still that weird ass hiding bracket, which is just kind of annoying as hell. The cabling job makes no sense at all. Not all of the ATX spacers are pre-installed, though included. The fans are all 3-pin voltage controlled. You have only 2mm of space for cables behind the case, and the tempered glass side panel is still mounted using the go-through screws. But that case costs like 60 bucks, and for that you will get a ready-to-go deal. Slap in your system, don't bother about anything else, about any additional fans, nothing that will cost a premium, but you will still have 3 included fans in the front, 1 in the back, and there is a shit ton of RGB for those who think this is necessary. Additionally to that, you will get a free ARGB controller with motherboard pass-through, and the case doesn't look bad. And it performs surprisingly well for that price point. And in case you need more air pass-through, you can always just remove that white film that is creating the ARGB effect, and thanks to the fans already being white, the ARGB like reflection will still be there to some point. You know what, let's test it out. I will show you. You see, there is still an amount of ARGB effect created. Though you can now, from the side, because the camera is like slightly off to the case, you can still see like the ARGB strip, which is a bit annoying, but you see, you need more performance, you can do it for 0 euros. That's a very affordable price, but let's put it back in, otherwise I will lose it and then I will have issues for the B-rolls. So, to recommend or not to recommend? Well, given the price point, I don't see anything wrong with it. Sure, we have that list that could have been better, but cases that do have all of that list crossed off are like twice the amount of this, and then we are without fans. So yeah, for people that are looking for a good like starting point for even high performance builds on a budget, this is totally doable and usable for a long time, and a little upgrade for the fans, and you can then continue to use it longer and longer and longer. I don't see anything wrong with it. So yeah, from our side, I can absolutely recommend it for these use cases. Don't expect it to be, you know, very high quality and everything feeling so great, but generally it is okay. And for the price point, it is great. But okay, I think this should be it for today's video about the CMT212A. At this point, a huge thank you to FSP for providing us the case. But if you want to continue watching, then have a look at our take on the Silverstone SATA H1. Not as much ARGB as this one, but a real performer. On a side note, we still have a Discord server, and if you want to join, the link is in the description below. Anyway, thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.